I think the connection with construction and religious studies is that we pray the building doesn't fall down. Thinking of Winnipeg, to paraphrase a minister that I recently read something in his Facebook page on. He said something along the lines that the one thing about a good talk is that it's like a good joke. When you walk out the door, you forget the punchline. To that effect, if anyone enjoys the talk today and wants to walk out the door and remember the punchline, I've printed out copies of my talk and they're at the back of the room. In addition to that, and possibly to form the basis of maybe some coffee house meetings or whatever, I've included an appendix which covers some definitions, a little discussion of what religious pluralism is, how to anchor ethics, which can be anchored in many things. Scripture is one of them, but also human reason and thought. Developing ethics from principles, a methodology for how you could take, for instance, our 8 principles and develop a personal ethic or a personal moral framework from those principles. And then how to talk to other people about ethics who see the world very differently than you do, where there doesn't seem to be much in common. How do you reach across that divide and have a good conversation? So that's what's in the appendix, and those are all available on the back table when you're leaving. Blowing in the Wind, 1962, and the words are as poignant today as they were when Bob Dylan first wrote them. The refrain, blowing in the wind, really refers to how the answers to these difficult questions are really all around us. Yet at the same time, somehow we find it so difficult to act on those answers. In that sense, they're blowing in the wind. So let me ask you this. Is there such a thing as universal ethic? Can we find moral principles that work for everyone, everywhere? It's one of those big questions that keeps philosophers up at night, and honestly, it should keep the rest of us thinking too. Because in a world that's more connected than ever, but also more divided, this question really matters. People have been chasing this idea for centuries, and we're still wrestling with it today. Let's go way back, and I mean way back. There was this Greek philosopher named Diogenes. He lived around the 4th century BCE. That's before the Common Era. And this guy was a character. Legend has it that he lived in a barrel and would walk around Athens with a lantern in broad daylight, claiming that he was looking for an honest man. But he said something pretty radical for his time. I'm a citizen of the world. Not Athens, not Greece, the world. Think about how revolutionary that was in the 4th century BCE, where your city-state in Greece was everything. Your identity, your loyalty, your entire life revolved around whether you were an Athenian, a Spartan, or a Corinthian. And here's Diogenes saying, nope, I belong to humanity. For Diogenes, we're all citizens of one universal community, the cosmopolis. And that's where our word cosmopolitan comes from. We should treat everyone equally, no matter where they're from, what their background is. It's about expanding that circle of care outward. You naturally love your family. You care about your friends. Take those feelings and keep expanding that circle out to your neighbors, to strangers, to people across the ocean you'll never meet. It's this beautiful combination of empathy and duty. Now, fast forward to the 18th century in Europe. The Enlightenment is happening, this incredible period of intellectual ferment. And along comes Immanuel Kant, this German philosopher who rarely left his hometown, but whose ideas traveled the world. He came up with the categorical imperative, which sounds fancy, but here's what he meant. Only do things that you'd be okay with everyone else doing. Like, if you're thinking about wanting to get out of trouble, ask yourself, would I want to live in a world where everyone lies whenever it's convenient? Well, no. Well, then don't do it. And the second part of this imperative is even more powerful. Never treat people as just tools to get what you want. Treat them as valuable in themselves. Not as a means to your ends, but as ends in themselves. Every person has dignity. Every person matters. But Western ideals are not accepted everywhere. From antiquity through the UN's Universal Declaration of Human Rights in 1948 to today's debates about global justice, we keep running into the same fundamental problem. How do you respect different cultures while also saying that some things aren't negotiable? How do you draw that line? Now, the golden rule, do unto others as you would have them do unto you, that shows up everywhere. Christianity has it, Judaism has it, Islam has it, Buddhism, Hinduism, Confucianism, they've all got versions of this same basic idea. And yeah, international human rights frameworks have gained a lot of traction. The Universal Declaration, for instance, has been translated into over 500 languages. That's pretty impressive. But here's the criticism, and it's a serious one. Maybe what we call universal is really just Western philosophy dressed up in fancy clothes. Maybe it's Enlightenment thinking with a European pedigree, and when we try to apply it globally, we're not being universal, we're being imperial. Maybe pushing one set of moral standards on everyone is just colonialism with a nicer vocabulary. Cultural imperialism wearing the mask of universalism. And so you can see why people would say that, who wrote the Universal Declaration? Well, mostly Western powers, who dominated the philosophical conversation for centuries, European men. When we talk about human rights, are we really talking about rights that reflect all of humanity? Or are we talking about the rights that reflect Western values? But the other side of this debate says, well, look, we're facing climate change, pandemics, artificial intelligence, challenges that don't respect borders. A virus doesn't care about cultural relativism. Climate change doesn't pause for philosophical debate. We need common ground now more than ever. even if we're not sure we'll ever fully get there, even if the destination remains frustratingly out of reach. So that's the Western conversation. Now let's shift east to Asia, because the story there is just as rich and honestly way more diverse. Asian ethics are an incredible, complicated tapestry woven from ancient philosophy, colonial encounters, and breakneck modernization. And we have to be careful because Asia covers a lot of ground. We're talking about more than half the world's population spread across vastly different cultures. You've got Confucianism in East Asia, such China, Korea, Japan, Vietnam, emphasizing social harmony, hierarchical relationships, and respecting parents and elders. Buddhist ideas about compassion and karma spread throughout Southeast and South Asia, Thailand, Myanmar, Sri Lanka, Tibet, and of course Japan. The focus is on reducing suffering, understanding that all life is interconnected, that our actions have consequences that ripple out across time and space. Islamic principles shape ethical life across Central Asia, parts of Southeast Asia, like Indonesia and Malaysia, and into South Asia, like with countries like Pakistan and Bangladesh. And Islamic ethics, we'll get deeper into this in a minute, offers this holistic vision where you can separate your spiritual life from your daily actions. Today, Asian countries are navigating some absolutely fascinating social, political, and ethical territory. You've got economic boom times. Look at China's rise. Look at the Asian tigers, Hong Kong, Singapore, and South Korea and Taiwan. But alongside that, intense debates are underway about democracy versus authoritarianism, individual rights versus collective welfare, and keeping cultural identity intact in the face of globalization. There's no single story here. What you're seeing is the world's most populous continent saying, we've got our own ways of thinking about ethics, thank you very much, while also picking and choosing what works from Western ideas. It's not rejection, and it's not wholesale adoption. It's selective adaptation. Let me tell you now about Islamic ethics for a bit, because it offers a holistic approach that's quite different from how Western philosophy often works. In Islamic thought, there's no separation between your spiritual life, your personal character, your family relationships, your business deals, your political engagement. It's all connected. It's all part of living ethically before God. The goal is what is called Isran, in other words, excellence or beauty in action. It's doing what's right, not just on the outside, following the rules mechanically, but with genuine intention, always aware of the divine. There's this famous hadith, which is a saying of the Prophet Muhammad, that defines Isran as worshiping God as if you see him, and knowing that even if you don't see him, he sees you. It's about that kind of consciousness. So what does this look like in practice? Justice, standing up for the oppressed, even when it costs you personally, even if it's against your own family, your own tribe, your own interests. The Quran is really emphatic about that. Compassion and mercy. God is called the most compassionate, the most merciful, at the beginning of nearly every chapter of the Quran, and Muslims are supposed to reflect these qualities in how they treat others. Not just other Muslims, all people, all creation. Trustworthiness, keeping your word, honoring your commitments, being reliable. This extends to responsibilities towards God, towards other people, and even towards the environment. Humans are seen as trustees of creation. Moderation, finding the middle path, avoiding extremes in all aspects of life. Not asceticism, not excess, balance. I wanted to cover Islam in a little bit more depth because of all the modern world religions. It's probably one of the most misunderstood religions and faith orientations in North America. So I thought it was worthwhile looking a little bit closer at its aspirations. And like any religious aspirations, not everyone lives up to those aspirations. But it's good to know what they are. Now let me shift gears and talk about something closer to home, something that might feel more familiar. The Canadian Unitarian Council has 8 principles, and they're worth exploring, not just because we covenant and affirm them, but because they represent a different approach to ethics, one that's explicitly how you live, not just what you believe. The first principle, every person has inherent worth and dignity. Every person, no exceptions. Not because what they've achieved or what they believe or how they behave, inherent worth. That's the starting point. Second, justice, equity, and compassion should guide us how we relate to each other. Be fair, be kind. These should be the baseline for human relations. Third, accept one another and help each other grow spiritually. Support each other's journeys. Create communities where people can be themselves and develop. Fourth, everyone has the right to freely and responsibly search for truth and meaning. Question things. Explore. Doubt. Inquire. But do it responsibly, with humility, with openness to being wrong, and with respect to others. Fifth, use your conscious and democratic processes in your community and society. Individual moral judgment plus collective decision-making. Neither pure individualism nor pure collectivism. Six, work towards a world community with peace, liberty, and justice for all. Think globally. Recognize that your ethical obligations don't stop at your national borders. Seventh, respect the interdependent web of all existence. We're all connected. People, animals, ecosystems, everything. What you do ripples upward. You're part of this larger whole. Eighth, actively dismantle racism and systemic barriers. Being passively not racist is not enough. Being a good person is not enough. You have to do something. You have to take action, both individually and collectively, to challenge oppressive systems. The big takeaway from all 8, how you live and engage with each other matters more than what you believe. It's about compassion, justice, responsibility, and recognizing we're all interconnected. Now, these 8 principles actually fit together remarkably well. They build from the individual outward in expanding circles of concern and action. You start with individual dignity. That's the foundation. Then you move to just relationships between people. Then supportive community. Then you've got the method for how to engage with truth and meaning. Free but responsible inquiry. Then the circle expands outward to democratic participation, to global justice, and finally situates everything in ecological context. And the eighth principle demands concrete action on all of these previous commitments. It's not just philosophical, it requires practice, doing. They're held together by one core insight that runs through all of them. Interdependence requires both freedom and responsibility. Each person has worth, that's principle number one, and we're all part of an interconnected web. That's principle 7. We're called to treat each other with justice, equity, and compassion. That's principle 2, which directly flows from recognizing everyone's inherent dignity. Freedom of conscience exists, principle 5, alongside the requirement that our search be responsible, principle 4. Acceptance of others, principle 3, comes with actively dismantling barriers, principle 8. And we're working towards a world community with peace, liberty, and justice for all, principle 6, which extends our commitment to justice and compassion beyond our immediate circles to encompass all of humanity. But yeah, there are some productive tensions here between these principles, and I want to be honest about them, because I think the tensions in our 8 principles are part of what makes the framework powerful. What happens when someone's free search for truth leads them to beliefs that contradict justice and equity? Like, what if someone searches for truth and concludes that certain groups of people are inferior? The principles suggest that freedom has limits. It has to be responsible. It has to respect others' inherent worth. So there's a boundary. Or what about acceptance versus accountability? Principle 3 says accept one another. Principle 8 says actively dismantle harmful systems and challenge racism. So which is it? Do you accept people as they are, or do you hold them accountable for harm? I think the answer is both. You can accept the person, recognize their inherent worth, while still challenging harmful beliefs or structures. But it takes real nuance. It's not easy. Or consider democracy versus inherent rights. Principle 5 values democratic processes, majority rule, collective decision-making. But principle 1 says every person has inherent dignity. So what happens when the majority votes to violate someone's dignity? Well, some things aren't up to democratic decision. This reflects the fundamental tension in liberal democracy itself between majority rule and inalienable rights. But here's the thing, and this is crucial. These tensions are not bugs in the system, they're features. The framework is consistent precisely because it acknowledges these tensions exist. It's sophisticated enough to mirror the complexity of actual moral life. The principles recognize that freedom without responsibility becomes harmful individualism. Justice without compassion becomes harsh judgment. Individual rights pursued without ecological awareness becomes destructive to the planet. Passive acceptance without active anti-oppression work just perpetuates injustice and lets harmful systems continue. These principles check and balance each other. Your freedom to search for truth is limited by your responsibility to respect others' dignity. Your acceptance of others is enriched and deepened by encouraging their growth and transformation. Your individual worth is understood not in isolation, but through interdependence. You matter because you're connected to this larger whole. In the end, this isn't some simple, tension-free ideology that gives you easy answers. It's a sophisticated ethical framework that mirrors reality's complexity. It's consistent in acknowledging that moral life involves ongoing negotiation between competing goods that are all valuable. Individual freedom and collective responsibility, personal liberty and social justice, acceptance and transformation, tradition and progress. All of it oriented towards love, justice, and the flourishing of everything and everyone that's interconnected. And maybe that's the real point here. Whether we're talking about ancient Greek cosmopolitanism, Kant's categorical imperative, Islamic ethics, Confucian harmony, India's constitutional pluralism, or Unitarian principles. Maybe we're never going to tie ethics up in a neat little bow with a perfect universal system that everyone agrees on and that solves all moral dilemmas. Maybe the work is in the wrestling itself, in the negotiating, in the trying to balance all these goods while keeping our eyes on what really matters. Treating each other with dignity, working for justice, caring for the vulnerable, respecting the planet, and recognizing that we're all in this together. Engaging with different moral frameworks doesn't mean we have to compromise our core beliefs or fall into moral relativism. Instead, it encourages us to hold our principles with a sense of openness and humility, acknowledging the varying viewpoints in the world while still acting authentically. It's about clearly explaining our values in a way that's relatable, even to those who may not share them with us. Because at the end of the day, our interconnection, that web that links all of us together, isn't just a nice philosophical idea, it's reality. What happens in one part of the world affects the rest. Climate change, pandemics, economic crises, technological change, none of these respect borders. And so the search for common ethical ground, even if we never fully arrive, even if it remains frustratingly incomplete, might be the most important work we can do. Not to impose one's cultural values on everyone else, not to pretend differences don't exist or don't matter, but to find enough common ground that we can face our shared challenges together while respecting the beautiful, messy, complicated diversity of how human beings across the world understand what it means to live well. Thank you.